Welcome to Creative World. In this video, I will briefly introduce power sources used in electrical networks. Knowledge about these elements is mandatory as it helps to solve complex network problems easily. Without wasting time, let's proceed towards the topic of video. There are two major types of power sources used in electrical networks. One is independent source and the other one is dependent source. And these are further categorized into 6 types. Two of them belong to independent sources and rest of 4 belong to dependent source. These types are listed here: independent current source and independent voltage source. These two belong to independent sources. And voltage controlled current source, current controlled current source, current controlled voltage source, and voltage controlled voltage source. These four belong to dependent sources. Now we will discuss all these types in detail. The first one is independent current source. Definition of this element is: an independent current source maintains a specified current through its terminal, regardless of the voltage across its terminal or any other circuit elements. In simple words, independent current source, which is also known as constant current source, keeps constant current across its terminal. Change in load connected to it and voltage across its terminal does not affect its output current. This is the symbol of independent current source. I indicates its current value. This is the example of independent current source used in an electrical network. It will keep supplying 12 mA regardless to the configuration of this network. For an example, if the resistance values are changed or their connection are changed, it will still supply 12 mA to this network. Next is independent voltage source. An independent voltage source is a two-terminal device which can maintain a fixed voltage. An ideal voltage source can maintain the fixed voltage independent of the load resistance or the output current. In simple words, independent voltage source, which is also known as constant voltage source, keeps specified voltage across its terminals. Its terminal voltage does not affect by change in load and the current driven through it. This is the symbol of an independent voltage source. It often represented with this symbol as well. And the example of independent voltage source is shown here. In this example, two independent voltage sources are used. One is 12 volt and other one is 4 volt. And these will keep specified voltage across their terminals regardless of the load connected to them. Increase or decrease in load values will not affect the output voltage of these sources. Next is voltage controlled current source, and it is dependent source. Definition of this element is: a voltage controlled current source is an element whose current is controlled by voltage inside an electrical network. In simple words, the current of this source will be controlled through the value of voltage across any element in that circuit. And if the voltage of that element change, the current through this source will also change. Symbol of voltage controlled current source is shown here. This is the equation of current for this element. I is equal to A multiplied by V. A is a constant multiplier and V is the voltage which is controlling the current of this element. Here is the example of voltage controlled current source. Current of this dependent source is being controlled through this value 2 VA, and the VA is the voltage across this element. If any change occurs in the value of this voltage, the current through this dependent source will also change. Next is current controlled current source. A current controlled current source is an element whose current is controlled by current inside an electrical network. This source is similar to voltage controlled current source, but instead of voltage, current is being used to control the current of dependent source. Symbol of current controlled current source is shown here. Its current equation is I equal to A multiplied by Ix. A is a constant multiplier and Ix is the current through an element inside a network which controls the output current of this dependent source. Here is the example of current controlled current source used in a network. The current through this element is being controlled by the value of 4Ix and Ix is the current through this branch. If any change occurs in the value of Ix, this will affect the output current of this dependent current source. Next one is current controlled voltage source. A current controlled voltage source is an element whose output voltage is controlled by current inside an electrical network. This is dependent voltage source whose output voltage are being controlled through the current of an element inside a network. The symbol of current controlled voltage source is given here, and the voltage equation of this element is V equal to A multiplied by Ix. A is a constant multiplier and Ix is the current of an element which is controlling the output voltage of this dependent voltage source. An example of current controlled voltage source is shown here. Voltage across this dependent source is equal to 2000 multiplied by Ix and Ix is the current through this loop. If any change occurs in the value of Ix, the output voltage of this dependent source will also change. Last one is voltage controlled voltage source. A voltage controlled voltage source is an element whose output voltage is controlled by voltage inside an electrical network. Output voltage of this dependent source is being controlled through the voltage across any other element in that network. Symbol of voltage controlled voltage source is shown here and its output voltage equation is A multiplied by Vx. A is a constant multiplier and Vx is the voltage across any other element which is controlling the output voltage of this source. Here is the example of voltage controlled voltage source. Output voltage of this dependent source is equal to 2Vx. Vx is the voltage across this element which is controlling the output voltage of this source. If any change occurs in Vx, the output voltage of this source will also change. So concluding our discussion, there are 6 types of power sources used in electrical networks. Independent current source which maintains constant specified current across its terminals regardless of the circuit connected to it. Independent voltage source which maintains constant voltage across its terminal regardless of the circuit connected to it. Voltage controlled current source whose output current is being controlled through a voltage which is present across any element in that circuit. Current controlled current source whose output current is being controlled through a current value which is passing through any other element in that circuit. Current controlled voltage source whose output voltage is being controlled through a current which is passing through any other element in that circuit. And voltage controlled voltage source whose output voltage is being controlled through a voltage value across any element in that circuit. First two sources have fixed output values and their output does not affected by any other quantity, so these sources are known as independent sources. While the last four does not have fixed values across their terminals, their output values are dependent on any other circuit element parameter. So that's why these are considered as dependent sources. So this was all about the power sources which are used in electrical network problems. Thank you. See you in next video.